So, hello again and welcome back. I'm Aarnimetsa from pokerimania.com and we are having the second part of our public-private coaching with our moderator xxIxx.
Yes, let's begin. Hope everyone can hear and see the picture again.
Yeah, I think we can see the
Yep.
picture again. And I hope that everyone can also hear sounds. But I think like right now we are going to create a new report on the poker tracker.
Yeah.
And let's create the player report and name it position report. And add common stats report. Yeah, let's finish it. Like I have said that in a spin and go, there are 5 different positions. And now we are trying to start to filter the stuff for that we can see every position from one single report.
Yeah.
So on the report stats, I think that first one we can remove is the player name because we all know that who you are. So
Okay.
the report stats, double click it and let's add some new stats. Let's add the position stat on search
Okay.
available stats. Then there's the search box on the bottom
Oh yeah.
and search for position. And position full ring, I think it's going to be the best one. And then let's search for handed. Mm, search for play. We are trying to search for how many players are in the hand. Mm, go down. Mm, players per hand. Yeah, so now we got divided. Now we got our different positions divided, and we could actually raise the players per hand to be the first stat and the position to be the second stat. And then we'll need to add some more interesting stats. We can also add the hands to be the third stat here. And we can see that you have played a ton of heads up in these games. And you have won chips on every other position except three-handed small blind.
Yeah.
But so I think that one thing that I like to do more than chips one, I like to see big blinds per 100. So search for 100 there. Because we also want to see the all-in equity adjusted and we want to see the big blinds per 100. So
So
add
both
both of
these.
those. Yeah, add both of those to the report. And raise the hands to be the third one. So I think in general that the chips one it's going to be okayish. Then that adjusted would even be better. But the all-in adjusted big blinds per 100, that's the most important. That's the most important stat that we are. And actually we are only seeing 33,000 hands. I don't know if you go down to see which part of this or where when these. Oh, these are
Oh
after the
yeah,
previous
I could
coaching.
add. I could add every.
Add hands only after the previous coaching. So the add the hands for to up to today here. And we could add some more interesting stats here. Really interesting. I have never seen that one. We are two-handed and on the button. That should be impossible. I wonder how that's happened. Oh well, these things happen. So so. I think that one part that we saw last time around, that you were losing on heads ups, small blind, you were losing on small blind and big blind, and you were losing a lot on both of those positions. And I
Yeah.
think those losing parts are pretty much in control, and I think that's very good. You are not losing a lot of chips in any position, and there are positions that you could gain more chips, like the I think the small blind and the big blind in the heads up are both positions that you can gain chips in.
Okay.
But let's then add some of these stats. Like one of the stat that I think is going to be really important would be, I'm trying to now think about the how we would lay out the stats in the best way. But I think race first in would be a good tool to have. Actually, we should have add limp and race first in here.
Limp.
Yeah. So now we are trying to focus on the stuff that when you are pre-flop limp,
And race first.
race first in. So
So that's
race.
a race. RFI.
It should be found at the R. You are having tons of custom stats just so.
Yeah.
Race first in. So out of those stats that when we are seeing limp and race first, then we can see that what do you do when the play is unopened to you. And also we can see how much you are folding. And one thing that I'm noticing in here, on the button I think that from 40 to 50% race first is going to be okay. And I
Okay.
don't think that it makes that much sense to limp that much on the button, so I think it should be pretty much in control. I think in the games that you are playing, it might make sense to even raise a bit less when you are not getting the pots easily.
Yeah.
Easily that then you are just going to get yourself in bad situations, and the position doesn't have that much value, or the position has the less value the less chips you are having left on the flop. And in these games when we are playing a hyper turbo game, and the later the game goes the less value position has, but there is still value in position. But I'm just thinking that in the button we are making life a bit easier for ourselves if we are not if we are not being the most aggressive in that spot. And I think when I'm looking at these stats as well, that
Yeah.
you are very aggressive in the three-handed small blind. And what's a
Yeah.
big surprise for me that you are like it's 82% that you are playing. And also if you are comparing to the heads up small blind, you are playing only 73%. And in general, I think that there are more profitable opportunities to play hands in heads up small
Yeah.
blind than in three-handed small blind. So I think there I think we would need to check at some point on how you are playing those small blind situations in heads up, and is there something that we can either steal more or limp more. And I think the most easiest way to widen your ranges would be to include limps there more. But
So basically tone down the three-handed
I
a
think you
little bit,
should
or
I
not.
I think you should tone down the three-handed a bit. I think it's at the edge. It works pretty well now, but I think that at the two-handed small blind, that's going to likely be something that you could get even more chips out if
Yeah.
you would play even more hands out of the heads up small blind.
Yeah.
So right now I'm also thinking like now we know what you do in general, like what are the strategic lines you are taking when you are facing an unopened pot.
Yeah.
But then there is going to be an interesting spot that what happens when you are in a pot that someone has already raised.
Yeah.
So I think we should add stats on how often do you call steals, like search for call. Mm. Uh, there should be call 2 bet. Is it at the complete top? No. Go down a bit. Call
This.
pre-flop 2 bet, yeah. And also search for the 3 bet.
This one.
Yeah. So let's go to see those. Now I wonder a bit, because there should never be a situation when you are two-handed that you would actually there are situations when you have limped yourself and your opponent bets. So okay. And on this heads up big blind play, you are three betting about 23%, you are calling about 29%. I think that might also be something that we should take a look at, like how often do our opponents open, and are there more hands you could defend profitably.
Yeah.
And three-handed small blind, you are calling pre-flop raise more often than three betting. I think on the three-handed small blind there are opportunities to three bet more than flat call.
Okay.
But I don't think that's anything to be worried about. On the big blind, in three-handed, you are playing back about 40% of the time. I'm thinking right now that we should probably filter that a bit. So let's go at the complete down. And Pete got 86% raises from the three-handed small blind and 60.62 big blinds per 100. Sounds pretty awesome, and only 1,600-ish. Yeah, if you... I think that might work for a small while, but I think most of the players are going to be at about break even at the small blind three-handed, and it's going to be really hard position to play profitably. But like this comment for xxIxx is that it rings my alarm bell when there is a situation that the player plays more hands on three-handed small blind that when he's out of position post flop than what he plays on the heads up small
Heads
blind
up,
when
yeah.
he's in position. So then it's either a thing that he plays too many hands on the three-handed small blind or too few hands on the heads up small blind. And as I see that the three-handed small blind has come a long way since the last time, like we are coming from, if I remember correctly, we are coming from losing something like 20 or 15 big blinds or big blinds per 100 hands to losing only 3, and that has a huge impact on how profitably you can play.
Yeah, I
But
think that's the one of the biggest things, because last time we talked a lot about blind play on the three-handed game,
and
because that's where I had the some weird brain code that we're on a 6-max bubble instead of heads up situation.
But let's now filter this down a bit. So
Yeah.
let's go on the left side, let's go all the way down. More filters on the quick filter part. Let's filter on hands that we have a raise from the small blind, so hand details. Let's filter for player position. Player position pre-flop. And position of, let's select from the position of the first raiser. And the first raiser is exactly number 9. That's always the small blind. And add both of those add on buttons there. Click the on buttons. Yeah, now add to filter. And save and apply filters. And this is because I want to know that how do you play on the three-handed big blind when you are raised from the small blind. And you are actually playing with pretty similar ranges, or at least it looks like that you are playing pretty similar ranges, I think, than you would be playing against, because I think they look pretty similar to. But I think that in these situations, if you are at the big blind, it will depend on how big bet sizing your opponents are in generally doing. But I'm thinking that that's something that we'll need to discuss on the and probably filter for some of those hands of when we are at three-handed and we are in the big blind, because I think that there are plenty of opportunities that we can, especially if our opponents are min raising, that we can call profitably.
Yeah.
And
So it's folding too much.
I think we are quite likely folding too much, because if we are calling the pre-flop bet 27% of the time and we are 3-betting 20% of the time, then it's going to be about 47. So I think there is space to call more,
Okay.
because you can play in position. So especially against small raises,
Yeah.
there, like if opponent min raises, even if he plays like only half of his hands, we can play pretty much 70% ish, because
Yeah.
we don't need that great of a share in the pot, and also we are playing in position, which means realizing our equity is a lot easier.
Yeah.
And actually, this is now a bit too much about. I think this is then something that we'll need to save, this whole thing, this whole report that
Yeah.
has been done, because that's easy for you to look at later on as well.
Yeah. And
Have things
compare.
change. So press the save button in there. Now we are just praying that your computer doesn't crash. Otherwise, you'll need to wait for this coaching to be available on YouTube so you could
Yeah.
create the reports.
It's alive.
It's alive, it's alive.
Yeah. Great.
So
This is something also. This is very good because this Pocket Tracker 4 has just excellent ways to create these reports, but it's the how to make these. It's not quite easy to start from scratch or try to find how to do these things. This is very good because I get tools for easy way to analyze afterwards and compare.
if you think that this is very good, how would you like to go on doing a second report? Because I started wondering about the big blind, that
Yeah.
our range, how we should generally approach the situation on the big blind against the small blind.
Yeah.
What does it depend on?
So what do you mean?
Like, how much hands should we play in big blind against the small blind? What does it depend on?
Well, are we talking about three-handed or two-handed or just all
I
in
think
general?
I think all in general, but we can narrow it down for only three-handed big blind play.
Okay.
What factors affect on how many hands we can play, or how many hands we should play?
Obviously, it depends on the villains, and
What kind of range do our villains have?
yeah,
So I think next thing what we should do, I think, is to create a report that we see that how often our villains are going to raise us from the
yeah,
small blind, or how often a general villain in your games will raise from the small blind.
yes, that's great.
So let's do a new report. And this is an all players report. And let's add the report name as well. Let's say it's a general population. Yeah, GP, you can't typo that, so
Yeah,
let's finish it. And right now we are getting a filtered view on all the players, and it might take a while to appear, but then we'll first look at what's the problem in here and let's then start fixing it.
Problem is the hero.
Yeah. So we are poisoning our data, so if we are arranging by the amount of hands, we can see that there is a lot of our hands.
Yeah.
And for some reason, the same player, that our player will have also two different situations. So we'll then need to get rid of our hero. And that sounds so cruel. So let's go, move your mouse to the left and until you see filters. There's a filters link.
This one.
Yeah. And add new simple filters. And we are adding hand details. Player is hero. And add to filter. And now we are doing a magic that click the player is hero and add the not selected. And then save and apply filters. And yeah, that's exactly what we want to do. And now when we are arranging by hands, our hands are not poisoning the data anymore.
Yep.
So we could add the general stats that we did add, like the limp and race first and 3-bet and call steal. Let's start with the hands for unopened play.
Okay.
Like race first and limp. I think it's probably better to search for first, because there should be pretty few stats where there is only first.
And limp.
Yeah. Preflop limp. So now we start to get some kind of an idea here. And let's add those stats on what happens in the raised pot. So 3-bet preflop and 2-bet preflop, or 3-bet preflop and call 2-bet.
Call 2-bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
You are having cold call. Just search for call. I think we found it that way. Call PS 2-bet, yeah. You are having quite good stats there because you are already having the custom stats for open shoves and non-all-in bets. So you can create some quite interesting reports with these as well. So now we want to know that how do our opponents do when they are at the small blind when the game is three-handed. So we need to filter it from the filters. So let's go down and let's add more filters there.
We have this filter active still.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And add filter, hand details, player position preflop, and position of active player, and active player is exactly 9. Yep. And add to filter.
Add to filters.
Yeah. Now when we are looking at the filters, we are filtering the position of first raiser. Actually, let's remove the position of first raiser.
This one here.
Yeah. And add another filter. Number of players. Players dealt into hand is between 2 and 2. 3 and 3. Yeah, add to filter. And this is actually something that I'd say that you should save as a quick filter, because this is something that you constantly want to use. Like this is going to be three-handed small blind. Yeah. You pretty much, when you are playing a lot of spin and goes, you want to have the filters for every position because you'll want to use it pretty often. So save and apply filters. I think that's quite interesting. At the bottom row here, where we can see that what? So on the bottom row, you can see the 3,273 players.
Yeah.
You can see like how much your average opponent, when he's on the small blind, when the pot is unopened, how often he tries to steal you. And he actually tries to steal you not that often even.
Yeah.
He only tries to steal about 30% of the time. And when average player steals with about 30% range, I'm thinking that it might be a situation that you don't need to. You are like now defending about 46%. So I think you are actually defending pretty well against the general population here.
Okay.
And the opponents are limping a ton from the small blind.
Yeah.
So in these games it might be even more important to not just think about what we are like. I think for example, in $15 or $30 spin and goes, it starts to be increasingly more important to know what you are doing against a race. But in these games, it seems to be increasingly more important to know about what you are doing against a limp, as there are more players limping than.
Yeah.
But
like some of the hands from the first part were limp hands.
Yeah, there are some limp hands, and it probably means that when opponents are still opening quite a few, so in general, when opponent limps from the small blind, there needs to be a decent amount of defending, or there needs to be a decent amount of not defending, but there needs to be a decent amount of punishment for limping.
Yeah.
So that's something we'll need to look at. And actually, now when we have made this general population report, you should also save it.
Yeah.
Actually, you could probably search for shove there as well, as you seem to have these custom stats made.
Yeah.
So we can also look at how much your opponents will go down a bit. No, there isn't a stat how much an opponent opens shoves. It might be with a different name, so remove all of those. Go AI.
All
Try
in, yeah. Yeah.
AI, like artificial intelligence, but it should be all in. So let's see if there is a stat for 2-bet preflop all in and not all in. Nope. There seems to be a ton of stats, but not what we would want right now. Limp race, hands versus min race. Down, down. Down, down. Nope. There are like, does your opponent raise limpers all in or non all in? But we can't now find if there's a stat on easy stat on just when opponent raises, does he do it with an open shove sizing, or like there are three bet stats,
Yeah.
but there are no 2-bet stats. There should be, but and Pete says about the same still data of general population here is 34%. And Pete 84, we have talked a bit about these games, and he also plays the $1 games, and I don't know, have you played against each other? I think not. I think that's not that likely.
Yeah, there's only call open shoves.
I think they are just named in a way that I just can't understand. I'm usually writing all my own stats, so I know what they are named, but I think
Yeah.
that's part of some HUD or something that has a ton of custom stats written. And Danita has to go. Thanks for being here, and thanks for the good comments and questions.
It's here, open shove, small blind, OS.
Yeah. And I think that's from one. I think that is from a heads up HUD, because it's
Yeah.
only on small blind, and
Yeah.
those are not that useful because you would need to have a stat on
3.
both, like the
Yeah.
button and the small blind. But I think that's pretty useful for this exact reason. That works really well, like open shove small blind and then min raise small blind. Add both of those. Like, even when we are not having enough data on any single opponent,
Yeah.
we are, from the population, we are still having quite okay data. And WTF is this? Why can min raise small blind and open shove small blind combined be less than raise first? Of course, when they are heads up stats, there has been no reason to exclude hand stat.
Yeah.
Button would already be opening because in heads up games there is no button.
Yeah.
This starts to feel like the Matrix, and there is no spoon. There is no button.
Except that one hand that I played two-handed as a button.
Yeah, then it's really that there is no button, but
Yeah.
I think that those stats are quite unusable
Yeah.
in this situation. I hope that they would have been great. But in general, this is something that we would like to start dividing stuff like how often does our opponent raise small and how often does he open shove.
Yeah.
And also on those, like, we can go pretty, like, we can see here that we are just having stats on when game is three-handed and our opponent is from small blind, even though we are having one player with 28 hands. So, like, we can know that when he's raised first and is like his limp is 0, we can
Yeah.
probably know that he limps less than 25%. And when he raises first for 47%, we know that it's probably between 35 and 65, so he's likely being quite aggressive player. So
Yeah.
we don't know that much on a single player. But when we are looking at the whole population, we are having 12,000 hands. Like if we are looking at the whole population that their race versus 31.38,
Yeah.
we can know that the population that you have encountered would race first between 30 or 32% of the time, and that's something that can be useful. And we
Yeah.
can either start filtering that closer to like certain stack depth, and the more hands you have, the more useful it becomes.
Yeah.
But this was in general, I was trying to compare the different games, that like how often should you be defending on big blind against a small blind race, and one of the major things there would be how much the small blind is opening. The more the small blind is opening, I think if the small blind opens something like 70% and like 70% with a small raise, then we can call any two cards. And if it's like something like 50%, we can call wider because we are having position post flop.
Yeah.
So this is going to be more about the strategic side. Did you save the report already on the report
Uh,
settings?
from here.
Yeah.
I think I did, but let's do it again just in case.
Mm, but But let's go up a bit. So I'm now like looking at the big lines in these situations. I'm also slightly interested in if we are looking at the three-handed games. If we are looking at the button opening three-handed, what kind of range do we get to our button? So if we are editing our filter
Okay.
at the bottom,
Ah, here.
yeah, if we are at the bottom, if we are editing the three-handed small blind, editing to the three-handed button, like how often does a general opponent in $1 spin and goes open from the button? So more filters. And position of active player, position of selected exactly 9. Close that one. And add a new filter. Hand details, player position, player position pre-flop. And we are wanting to have the position of active player, it's going to be exactly 0. So exactly 0 is the button. And add to filter. And this is also something that's really good to save as a quick filter, because this is probably something that you want to use a lot. And Pete 84, if you are having like 34% of raises, and I think seeing 1/3 of those as open shoves would make sense.
So
Save
save
and
and
apply.
apply.
Yeah. I wonder though that when like they were combined the min raise, and there was the min raise small blind and the open shove small blind. I wonder that do we have players in the spin and go games that are raising with other sizing than open shoving and min raising, or like are they min raising or are they raising 3x as standard or something?
Yeah, sometimes.
But I don't think that the standard sizing would be 3x.
Yeah.
That like
If they're
22%
if
would
they're
be.
as brilliant as I was opening that 70 chips.
But so in general, if we are looking at three-handed button stats, like button opens about 27% of the time.
Yeah.
So that's something that we'll need to, like in basically, when we know that button opens about 27% of the time, then we can do a mental thought about what's about 27%. We are 25% usually. I'm thinking that it's like any pocket pair, any ace, and
Yeah.
then any Broadway. That's going to be quite close to 25%.
Yeah.
So that would be my mental model of thinking about what our opponents would open three-handed, and
Yeah.
that's what I would then play against that. What do I wanna shove? And if you have like calculated a Nash three bet on, but I think on those situations it would be against opponents that would open a lot more from the button, and I think you would be playing too aggressively against a general opponent here.
Okay.
So, but I think that when you had played, we could also see your stats. So let's see your side of the story. So, and it's actually really good to see that probably Pete 84 already made the pretty much the same reports, so it's something that's instantly useful for other ones of you and also for some other games as well. And let's go back to the report that you used for yourself.
The hands report or
Did we forget to save the other report?
oh, it was the position report.
Oh, it's the position report. Okay. And now we want to have a different kind of filter there.
Yeah.
Clear the filters completely. And more filters. More filters and hand details. Left side hand details. And player position. Pre-flop. Position of first raiser. On the drop down that says active player, select it and go to the active first raiser. And on. And let's have the first raiser to be the button. So exactly. And add to filter. And add filter. And now we want to have hands that the small blind has not touched. So let's have actions and opportunities. And actions and opportunities is preflop. Preflop opportunities. So let's go down a bit. A phased steal attempt. Let's put it there. The phased steal attempt. Yeah, that's good.
In any position.
Yeah, because the steal attempt gets foiled if you have a caller or a three better.
Okay.
So then we are only looking at hands on the small blind or on the big blind that we have a button that has raised, but small blind hasn't done anything to the pot, so small blind has folded. But add to filter and save and apply filters. And now we are interested in knowing that how much you are calling and how much you are three betting these opponents that are opening with about a 25% range. And if you are looking at here that, oh my gosh, we are having an all-in adjusted big blind of -6 from the small blind, and we are having an all-in adjusted big blinds -48 at the big blind. And then usually the first reaction from students is that I must suck at this game and how do I fix this leak? But it's not about the question of that. It's if you are having the situation that, like, you are comparing always to the alternative action. Like if you are at the small blind, your alternative action would be to fold all of these hands because then you would not need to play the hand. But if you would fold every hand on the small blind, you would lose 50 big blinds per 100 hands.
Yeah.
And then on the big blind, if you would fold any hand, you would fold 100 hands. So these are now, they are ugly red numbers, but those ugly red numbers are telling us that from the small blind, when you are getting raised from the button, you are winning 44 big blinds per 100 compared to if you would fold every hand. And on the big blind, you are winning 52 big blinds compared to if you would fold every hand.
Yeah.
So actually, even though you are playing like you are calling and three betting with a wider range, you are playing pretty damn well against the button opener, because the button opener, you are playing with a wider range than the guy that opens from the button, but you are still winning money out of them even though they are having position.
Yeah.
This is probably when I'm starting to think about it, then it starts to be a this is one of those clumsily translated sayings, but it would be a swamp forever.
Yeah.
Ever to go like, then I'm starting to think like, how often do our opponents, when they are raising with a 25% range, how often they are folding to a 3-bet?
Yeah.
And Pete84 asked, what if both of those numbers are positive? So you are winning against the button steal. That button tries to steal and you are still winning on those hands. Then I'm saying that you have run pretty awesome, because that's the worst equity situation you can have. or not the not worst, but it's just generally on those that you are getting most hands out of. It's generally one of those situations that, like, the unopened is the best case scenario for you, especially in the big blind. You are winning 50 big blinds per 100 hands. But, and also from the small blind, I think that you can, or you are creating your profit on the unopened small blinds. And Pete 84, I think it's possible for a small sample, but I don't think it's going to be possible for a long period of time. And Pete 84 says that you should do a coaching on filters and the use of it. I think this
That's
has been
yeah.
quite a coaching on how to use the report side on Poker Tracker. We had a
The coaching was kind of derailed into this because I feel it's very useful for me too, because I don't have enough time in my life to tinker around hours and hours to try and find these, so this is super valuable.
and I think this is something that we have now gotten like a first skeleton for you, and
Yeah,
you can then build upon that when you are having the general filters. Then you can start to think about, like, start to draft like general ranges on, if your opponent is, for example, if he's opening about 25%, then you can work with something like hold'em resources. And if
yeah,
he's folding like 75% of those hands, you don't need to be perfect on those, and you
yeah,
don't need to assume that your opponent plays perfectly. But I think especially for these $1 games, it will make a huge difference if you are comparing to what you have seen in real life than what a perfect player would do.
yeah. And also because the player pool is such big, and you really don't get any reliable stats on any of the players on these smaller stakes. So comparing it to the general population will get rid of the mental farts, like what I've been referring to, like a lot of people limp on this kind of position, or a lot of people do this and that, and it's just a random hands that are printed on the mind after they played weirdly or something.
Yeah, and I think also one good point on the random hands that are printed on your mind. I
Yeah,
think there is also a point that you don't need to have a lot of data. Like, if you are analyzing a hand and you are thinking that I don't have any idea what my opponent might have in this situation,
yeah,
then going through your own data and looking for similar situations, you don't need to have a lot of data.
yeah,
But even if you are having 5 hands,
yeah.
you are going from I have absolutely no idea to
I
I have
have five
some
ideas.
kind of comprehension.
Yeah,
Like, it's the point of measuring something. It's not to get perfect in something. The
yeah,
point of measuring is to reduce the uncertainty of the situation. And you can, like, have, if you are having 10,000 of certain situation, you can pretty well go like, yeah, this is how it works, and then you can go quite deep and
yeah,
go quite accurate and reduce the uncertainty by a lot. But usually
yeah,
those are also situations that you have a general idea already on how your opponents in generally play.
yeah.
And Kauris 84, I think that also explains why poker pros are having a job. Like, usually, like,
It's
going
not
and
hard work. It's
improving.
just something you need time to do, and when you have other things when you work on other things, then obviously you can't have enough time for tinkering Poker Tracker, and that's why it's easier when there's someone who has the time because it's his tool. It's good to get coaching from them.
But it's like when Kauri says that it's too hard work, like even if people know something that's what they could do, usually it comes to the point that, well, but that sounds like hard work. And
Yeah,
that usually also distances the players that are really good from the good players. That the really good players they are having less spots that they are they have said that this is too hard work.
if it would be easy, everyone would do it.
And Pete 84, you need to get up way too early, so we are going to end this quite soon, but
Yeah,
have a good night to Ukraine.
and maybe we'll see each other on the $3 games when I'm starting to switch to those more and more. I'll keep the $1 rolling too, but maybe we'll tackle some hands in the future, Pete. Good luck.
Yeah, and I thought that we could get these general reports done quite quickly, and it's like if you know something that you know how to do something, then it's
Yeah,
like this should take 3 minutes tops, and then when you are doing it, it takes 15 minutes. But
yeah,
or in the IT business usually, if you are having a work estimation, you are always multiplying it by pi, and you are getting a reasonable estimation.
yeah,
So, and this is also, in a way, this is different in a way because even though it took us something like 10 minutes per report to build this and to look at some data on the database, and actually
yeah,
these reports, because they are concentrating only on one thing and one table on the database, they
yeah,
are working pretty quickly even on your really slow computer that
yeah,
you complained about when you had some other reports that have tons of statistics
yeah.
added to those.
I
So
know so much about Poker Tracker that I didn't even realize that I could remove those.
I'm using a lot of those. Like I don't use the ready-made reports that much
Yeah,
at the statistics. I basically use the my reports, and I have
yeah.
probably something like 50 different reports and probably something like 150 different quick filters. So I'm just
This
drop
is a good
downing.
start. At
What?
least that this is a good start, and I now have some very useful ones to move along from.
Yeah, and I think the like most common thing is that if you like what I have heard that it's not useful for doing a report or it's not useful for getting data out of Poker Tracker because it's not perfect, like there are too many different types of players. But in these spin and goes, when you are playing, like when you are playing 2000 of these games and you are having something like 4000 players you have played against,
Yeah,
then they start to be that you need to have, like when you don't know anything about your opponent, then
yeah,
you need to have some kind of an idea what an average opponent is looking like. And that's also a great idea for you that if you are having your HUD stats, you
yeah.
can go through them and look at the general population. Like I have a note on my desk that has all the HUD stats of average opponents in the games.
Ah,
So
okay, that's a good idea.
so then I'm having a HUD stats on what average opponent does. So then I can start formulating my own idea own idea when I'm having the stats that is this player more aggressive than the population, is this player less aggressive, is this player more call happy, is this player less call happy.
Yeah.
And I think this is something you generally do. And for something like when I said on the percentages, we are not generally aiming for a certain percentage. Like as I said that early on, that when we discussed about the big blind playing heads up and big blind playing three-handed, that
Yeah.
we are not aiming for a certain percentage, but we know that something probably is out of whack if when you are in position you are having smaller amount of hands than you are playing when compared to when you are playing out of position.
Yeah.
So that's like the comparative deduction. And also I think that I'm using a lot of data in formulating my game plan, and like practically my game plan is alive every week, that when I have more data to do something, and when I'm trying to always find a certain situation and look like how my opponents are playing the situation, how am I playing the situation, do I have enough data to like see different options, and do I need to test, and should I have a generally, should I limp or should I raise or should I shove this hand in general. So
Yeah.
that's also why I have an idea on like how much you should raise on the button, because I have tried raising more, I have tried raising less, I have tried limping.
Yeah.
And Codis says that you need a HUD that which shows you what are the best lines to play my hand. That would be pretty awesome, but also it's probably against every poker site's rules, and it would be quite close to a bot, or it would actually be a bot. It would just have a human executing the orders.
Yeah.
And it's also going to be really hard. I think that there are some really smart guys are thinking about how to do the perfect option. And you can see with something like Hold'em Resources Calculator that there are still it requires a ton of calculation time, and you still don't get perfect results. That there, like the Hold'em Resources Calculator, it can only calculate different type of toy games.
Yeah.
So we are quite far away from a situation that we could have a HUD that would show the best lines, and it would be, if it would be possible, then it would be prohibited everywhere. And I've almost got to a tirade on how to make the poker more harder for the bots, but let's not go there. It's not the topic of this coaching. We have,
Yeah.
and like I think my aim in here was that at the first spot, let's get let's get some of these hands that you are having questions about what kind of line to take. And I think on those, like I think probably 6 of those hands were that we agreed on the line, and
Yeah.
probably about 1 or 2 of those were, or let's say 2 of those were hands that our lines were pretty close, and probably 2 of those hands that I thought that your line that you took was the worst possible line.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty good
It's an
for,
improvement.
it's pretty good for 10 hands. And then especially when I saw before coaching that when we had the technical problems with the reports, I
Yeah.
thought that we are going to take some we are going to try to think about how to get more out of those reports and how to make the reports quicker, because
Yeah.
nothing frustrates you more than if you need to wait for the results
Yeah.
a long time.
Yeah. Well, this was a very helpful. This like there has been discussions on the forums, especially on the Finnish side, on these type of coachings, and you've had these for some of the MTT guys, and now for me this is excellent. I now have good tools to start work on from.
I think this was probably the most in-depth look thus far on the reports. Usually it has
Yeah, and
been.
and there's luckily good amount of spin and go players out on the YouTube and on our forums that should get good value out of this,
Yeah, and
especially second part.
I think we already got value when we got a member of our site to do the reports himself
Yeah,
and compare the results, and he got something like 34% and you got 31% on the average player's aggression, so from the
yeah,
small blinds. So those are going to be quite close, and both of you are. I know that he's having a smaller sample size than you are, but
yeah,
I think that you are going to be quite close when you are having 12,000 hands.
yeah.
And now is probably the final question. That do you have any questions anymore?
Well, where's the next coaching? We'll
As
see
you
about
have,
that. I think there's tons of good stuff for me to start working on and start following on. So I'll just have to get all this in my mind now and rewatch this on YouTube too. So
but I think that what we watched here is probably going to be the most important thing.
yeah,
Is probably going to be the small blind aggression, or
yeah,
adding limps and adding more hands to play, because there are so many profitable hands to play on a heads up on a small blind,
yeah.
especially if you are against the busier player.
I'm kind of weirded out still because last fall when I played the heads up games, I opened the tons a lot more. And first in the first place, of course, they were deeper games all in all, and here on these games, the heads up is, well, sometimes it's second hand, but uh, they're shallower from to begin with, and and but the opening range was still, I was weirded out. It was that small. I thought I was opening more.
And I think that you probably were, and I don't think that when you are playing about 73% or something from the small blind, I don't
Yeah,
think it's bad, but I think that there should be easy chips for you to get.
yeah,
Or you were, I think you were, was it like two big blinds per 100 from the small blind in heads up, and that's
yeah,
probably the position you can get a lot more in.
yeah.
And also I think on the big blind in heads up, I think that there is possibility for you to win more than the two big blinds per 100.
Yeah. For Superpää, I could say uh, I changed to PT4 uh, when I started concentrating on tournament poker because there's tons more. There's so much you can do with this, and I think uh, for Holder Manager, there's lots of ready reports, but the tweaking is not as well executed as in Poker Tracker.
I think the best point of Poker Tracker is that if you are having time or money to buy the premium stuff, it probably you can probably do pretty much everything with it.
Yeah,
But it's also it requires a lot more. I think out of the box Hold'em Manager, you can probably get more out of Hold'em Manager.
Okay.
But with Poker Tracker 4, I started using it, or I trialed both of those, and I started using it when I noticed that I can do everything with it I want. But I think now it's time for us to
Thanks
say
for the
goodbye
audience
to
and
our
thanks for the
viewers.
coach.
So, do you have anything to say to our viewers?
Thank you for participating, and I hope that you guys got some value out of this also, as it seems that it already has. And on the future YouTube viewers, hope you enjoyed this coaching too. And thank you, Aarnimetsa, for excellent coaching again. I have now more tools to increase my ROI even more.
So, and thanks for everybody chatting. It's always easier to have a good session here, and also it usually pays off to have a bit more eyes on some hands, because I'm not always correct, and usually there has been good comments on the chat. And I'm thinking that it was nice to see so many of you today, and so thanks on my part to everybody on the chat. And now it's time to say goodbye. If you are going to sleep, have a good night. And if you are still playing poker, may this be a winning night for you. Bye.
Bye, good luck.